Well, hello there. Welcome to our first technique walkthrough of the year. Happy New Year to you. Happy 2023. It's going to take a while to get used to that, of course, but welcome. I hope you had a great holiday. Hope you had a great New Year's. Hope you're excited about doing some paint pouring and learning a not necessarily a brand new technique, but a new spin on a technique that we've covered before. So I'm all excited. I've got a bunch of stuff prepared and ready to show you and got a demo all set up. So it's going to be a whole lot of fun. So let's dive right in. Welcome, everyone. Hey, Monique. Great to see you. Hey, Pat. And Happy New Year to you as well. Hey, Donna. And we've got Facebook user. Hello, Facebook user. I don't know who you are, but welcome to the walkthrough. So I've got my barriers set up. We're going to be doing some Dutch pour, blowing around with paints. And our technique for this month is Dutch pour level 2. I named it level 2 instead of something like advanced Dutch pour or something like that. I didn't want to freak you out. It's basically the same as a regular type of Dutch pour technique that we've covered a long time ago, way back at the beginning of the membership. But I've thrown in a few extra little wrinkles to make it a little more exciting, a little more, you can get a little more cool effects with it. We're going to be working with some cell activators. And next week, we'll be working with some clear base coats as well. And there's a whole lot of interesting things you can do with clear base coats. So we'll be working on that. It's Judith. Hey, Judith, welcome to the live stream. Hey, Kathy is here. So fantastic. And let's see, LC has joined us as well. Awesome. So let's see here. Cool. All right. So let's jump over. I'm going to share my screen and show you a few handouts that I have prepared for you. They are all available right now inside the membership. If you go inside to the Pouring Studio technique walkthroughs, under the brand new one that says Dutch Pour Level 2, all of these are in there right now for you. The replay will be there as soon as we're done here, after I stop the live stream, of course. But they are all available for you. And I've put in some old ones that we used in the very first Dutch pour month that we went through. And so let's jump over there. So let me share my screen. And here we go. Let me pop my little self down in there. All right. So here we go. This is the Dutch pour level 2 technique. And just a little explainer about what the Dutch pour is. And then I've put a mixing formula here, a simple one that you could follow. I do have another more elaborate mixing sheet that we'll look at in just a second. And right here I put a simple cell activator recipe or formula. And this is the one we've used before with the acrylic ink. And I've got, where is my acrylic ink? Like the Liquitex ink right here is what I showed you before. You probably can't see that, but this is that simple Liquitex ink cell activator that we have messed with, played with before in the simple bloom swipe when we did that month. So you could use that, and it works really well. We'll be using some of that maybe tonight in the demo. I've also mixed up an Australian Floetrol cell activator. This is completely optional. You don't have to go buy Australian Floetrol just for this technique. In fact, I probably wouldn't recommend it. The simple cell activator works great, but if you're dying to try the Australian Floetrol and want to mix this up or have the Australian Floetrol, here is my very simple recipe for the cell activator, which is just 2 parts of the Australian Floetrol, 1 part paint. The paints that work best are the Amsterdam white or black. And then that's pretty much it. You can add a little bit of water if necessary. It's a pretty thin consistency just with these 2 ingredients by themselves. So if you want to try it out, I'll show you what it can look like in our demo a little bit later. But the simple cell activator works just as well, I think. They do vary slightly. There are different cell activators, so you're going to get slightly different results. But, and these, by the way, are totally optional. You don't have to use these cell activators at all if you don't want to. You can just focus on regular Dutch pours. If you want, if you're brand new or haven't done a lot of Dutch pours, I might recommend just sticking with just the straight Dutch pour. By itself, they are beautiful and really fun. But if you want to add the cell activator, you can certainly do so, and I'll show you how to do that. And I have a little note on the paint consistency. We're going to be using the number 4 or 5 consistencies for Dutch pours. The really thin mixtures, which are the number 4 micro mound or the number 5 zero mound. And I usually use the zero mound, but the micro mound also works. And you can get slightly different results. The micro mound is a little easier to maybe blow out. It's not so fluid as the zero mound, but they're very, very close. So either one of those works really good. I've got a little bit of a walkthrough down here. Just a refresher, we'll be going through all of this in the demo. And then down here, a few tips and tricks, a couple different alternative ways you can try doing Dutch pours if you want to. And we'll be looking at a few of these next week in the Painting Night Live. I'll be doing some different demos for you. And that is the walkthrough PDF that I have. Let's jump on over here. And I have finally created a final version of the Dutch pour canvas or Dutch pour coverage cheat sheet, excuse me. I've labored over this for way too long. This is probably version number 3 or 4. I've done lots and lots of experiments trying to figure out just the right amount of paint to use to put on your base coats for different size canvases. And the first one wasn't enough paint. The second version was too much paint. And then I got frustrated and stopped for a while. But this one I think is pretty good. At least I like it a lot. For me, this works really well. And you can see it's a very simple formula. These are the different size canvases over here. And then this is about how much of the base coat I would pour on and then use my hairdryer to blow out. And we'll be taking a look at that in our demo. So for 16 by 20, let's say, that's the size I'm going to be working with tonight. I would use about 6 ounces. So what I want to emphasize about this cheat sheet is this is a place for you to get started. These measurements work for me. I like this amount, but if you use these formulas or measurements and you find it's not enough for you or it's too much for you, feel free to modify them. Think of this as a starting spot just to get going, get your head around about how much paint to use as your base coat. And again, the base coat is the same consistency as all of our other colors, which is very thin. So, and we're going to be blowing this out, or you could spread it out with a palette knife if you wanted to. I tend to just blow it out with my hairdryer to cover the whole canvas, but it's a starting spot. It works good for me, but feel free to use less or more depending on your results and how you like to do your Dutch pours, because everyone's a little different. Some artists like very little thin coats, base coats on their canvases. Others like a lot more paint. So again, a starting spot for you. Don't take this as you must use these amounts and it's set in stone. It's not. And down here, I've got the formula that I use. It's the canvas length times the width divided by 55. And that's for ounces. And also I put milliliters next to the different sizes here as well. So if you're using metric size canvases, just find one that's maybe the closest and you can kind of tweak it from there. It's very difficult for me to come up with a cheat sheet in centimeters because I don't know what are the popular sizes in centimeters over in Europe, and it varies quite a bit. I've tried to find out, and the ones that are in, let's say, England or British Columbia, or over there in the UK, that's what I'm trying to say, are a little bit different. They seem to have a little bit different popular sizes than over in, let's say, Australia, or other places in Europe. So just find, and and there's so many different ones. It seems silly to come up with a cheat sheet for every single size, because there are a lot of different sizes. So find the ones that work for you, find what's closest, and use. Hopefully this will be very, very helpful for you. So let's see here. And so that is the long-awaited Dutch pour coverage cheat sheet. I finally have gotten it finished and I think it works pretty good. So let's jump over to the next one. And here is the paint mixing chart, the Dutch pour formula. Again, it's a very simple recipe, 2 parts Floetrol, 1 part paint. And I start with 1/2 part water, but you might have to add more depending on the color and brand you're using. So it's just kind of a starting spot, but you will need to use probably at least this amount. I've never used less than this amount of water, and usually I'll have to add a little bit more, to maybe a lot more if it's a thicker consistency of paint. So there is the little Dutch pour formula for you. Again, there's some notes down here. You can check it out. Consistency, we're going for number 4 or 5 on the consistency scale. But it's really thin. So it's thin stuff. And let's see, that's the chart. This is the old chart that I've created for the first Dutch pour technique we went through in the past, but it's still the same one I use to this day, and we'll be using it again for this month. Next up, this is an old PDF, but this is the Dutch pour blowout methods. I just thought I'd pull this up in case you forgot all about it. It's just kind of a diagram of ways you can use your hairdryer to kind of blow out the paint. So number 1 here is if we're going to be working in like a puddle pour type of method, which we might be doing quite a bit of this month. You kind of layer your paints in puddles on top of each other, and then you can blow out in any direction you want. And that works really well. Another one that I like a lot is if you're pouring your paint out in kind of in lines, and they could be long lines, short lines, any type of line. You can blow in either direction, so up and down, and that works really, really well. And that's a very popular one. You'll see a lot of different painters use. The next one, number 3, is more of a tree branch method. We're using a lines again, and you're blowing in kind of an angled direction. And they don't have to go always in the same direction. You can go angled forward and backward if you wanted to. Number 4 is more of a stream method. So you're kind of blowing in line with the way your paints are layered on your canvas. That's also kind of a popular one. And then number 5, which is probably the most popular one, is a combo method. So you're using a combination of these top 4 methods and just using them, combining them all into one. So you could use a little bit of the stream method if you want, a little bit of the puddle pour method, the tree branch, or the right angle method, kind of the up and down. So it's just kind of handy to have that next to you in case you're looking at your canvas and saying, what do I do now? This will give you maybe a little bit of guidance, or at least some ideas on how to use your hairdryer to blow out your paint. So that is there also for you in the membership. And that is it, I think, for the handouts I have. And if anything comes up, I'll make a new one if I need to. But I think that should get us started in our Dutch pour level 2. So let me get my mouse back over here and let me come back over here. I'll stop sharing my screen. There we go. And before I move on, let me see if there are any questions. Any questions about anything I've kind of gone over relatively quickly, but any questions so far? I'm going to just check here. And nope, not yet. Awesome. Okay. And Sonia is asking, when your paints need to be so thin, is it a good idea to have something to prevent cracking, the GAC 800? You could use that if you wanted to. Personally, I've never had any Dutch pour crack on me. It's never been an issue for me. So it also depends on the brands of paint you're using. If you're using Liquitex Basics or Amsterdam or some of those types of paints, a little bit higher quality paints, I don't think you really have to worry about it too much. I've never had cracking problems. But you could use some GAC 800 if you wanted to. You could use some Liquitex pouring medium if you wanted to. I've been meaning to do some Dutch pours using more of my Liquitex formula. Not so much for cracking or crazing or anything like that, but just to see how it affects the cells. I have a feeling it will create a lot more cells, but I haven't tested it yet. So maybe I'll work on that next week. But yes, feel free to add some. You don't have to add a lot of that material. But again, I've never really had any issues with cracking. Now, granted, I'm using these base coat quantities that I mentioned in the cheat sheet. If some people use way too much paint, that is really when you're prone to cracking a lot. And that has not so much to do with the paints being too thin as there's too much paint on the canvas. And then those top layers dry quicker than those bottom layers. And that's when you can get some cracking and crazing. So the amount of paint you have on your canvas is pretty important. But if you follow that cheat sheet, I think you'll be in really, really good shape, because we're not really putting lots of colors on top of our base coat. With the Dutch pour, less is more when it comes to adding your colors, because they really blow out quite far. So you don't really need tons and tons of paint. And we'll take a look at that also when we jump into the demo. But that's a great question, Sonia. Thanks for asking that. Hope that helps. Okay, so let's see here. Well, that is it. That's all I've got for you right now. Why don't we go ahead and dive into looking at some colors. I'll show you what I've prepared, and then we can get into a demo. And if you have any other questions as we go along, feel free to ask them, and I will do my best to answer them. I'm going to be using my little hair dryer tonight. I've got this one, which I prefer. I've got my big one. That one's a little powerful, so but I really like this little one, and it's worked really good for me. And by the way, if you want a link to this, let me know. I'll put it in the chat for you. You can get it on Amazon. It's very inexpensive, which I like. At least it was when I bought it. I think it's still the same price. And it does have a cooling button, which is kind of cool, and no pun intended. But I use a little strap to kind of hold that down all the time to keep that cool button on. And I found you don't want a lot of heat. The less heat, the better, really, when you're blowing out your paints. So if you have a cooling button, I recommend using it on your hair dryer. And let's go ahead and let's see. Let me flip the camera here, and I'll show you what we have got. Okay, so I've got my canvas ready to go. 16 by 20 again. That's what I'll be using. I have to spray the back. Maybe I'll do that now before I go any further, so I don't forget about it. Just spritz it with a little water. All right. And I do have my barrier walls up, as you probably noticed, because Dutch pours can be kind of messy and you can blow paint all over the place. But these barrier walls really help a lot contain the mess. So I recommend them. So right here I've got some base coat mixed up, and I'll show you what this is. I mixed all these up yesterday. Let me just give it a little stir. And so it's looking good. They're all, very thin. These are right now they're probably number 4, the micro mound consistency. But we'll give it a shot. And also you can experiment a little bit with the consistency. You can make it really thin like the No Mound, or you can keep it a tiny bit thicker just to see what works best for you. So I highly encourage you to experiment around with playing with those consistencies. They do need to be really thin, I'll tell you that, but and this is small adjustments, but we're going to use our base coat here, and for 16 by 20, again, we're going to be using about 6 ounces of paint. So what you could do is, what I like to do is measure it off into another cup, and then I'll pour it on my canvas. So if you get like a little measuring cup or something like this is really helpful. You can just, it's got measurements on the side, you can pour it in there, dump it on your canvas, scrape it all out, and then just clean your cup afterwards. Then you can get very accurate with your measurements. I recommend trying that a few times so you know exactly how much base coat's on your canvas. Then you can judge and see if it's too much or not quite enough, and then you can adjust from there. If you just dump it on and you don't really quite know how much, it's hard to adjust. So, measure out your base coat. I like to do that, and then you can really gauge how that's working for you. So I'm not gonna dump it on right now. I'm just gonna put it in here. So 6 ounces is what we need. That's how much I have in my little measuring cup. And I've got some other colors I've mixed up. I take the tops off here. I've got a purple, gray purple color. I've got a metallic cobalt blue, or the purple gray is what I'm using here, which I just love that color. And here we go. I've got a metallic cobalt blue, that Artist Loft color right here, which I also really like. I have got a gold. This is just, I think this is a Liquitex gold, but I just went to Hobby Lobby not too long ago, and I found this brand new gold. I didn't know about this, but Master's Touch came out with some new colors. They have a lot of new metallics, and they had this pearlized bright gold, and I haven't used it very often. I don't know how long this has been on the market, but I really like the color. It's a very bright, shiny gold, and they've got a metallic violet or a pearlized violet, green. So I got a whole bunch of them. So I'm excited to try these out. And this is the Hobby Lobby brand Master's Touch. They have a new kind of branding on their tubes of paint, which is kind of cool. So I'm excited to give these a shot. And so just if you have a Hobby Lobby close to you or you like those paints, go and check them out and give them a try. I'll be using them probably on and off here and there, and I'll let you know what I think about them. But so far I've used gold a little bit. I really like it. It's a little bit thinner than Liquitex, or I'd say it's probably thinner than the Amsterdam too, but it's a really beautiful color. So that is, but this is Liquitex gold, and I don't have that tube handy, sorry. And next up we have got, make sure this is the right one. This is Payne's Gray right here, and that is Amsterdam Payne's Gray, which I really like. And you might not know this, but the Amsterdam Payne's Gray is a semi-opaque color, whereas like the Liquitex and the other ones that I've used, Master's Touch also has a Payne's Gray. Those are both opaque, so I kind of like that the Amsterdam is a semi-opaque. Interesting tidbit. And then finally, I've mixed up some cell activator here. This is a white, and so this is the Australian Floetrol cell activator. And so I'll be using a little bit of this, and we'll see what it does. Sometimes in Dutch pours, the results can vary because you're blowing the stuff around with a hair dryer. Sometimes it likes to stay on top. Sometimes it kind of gets hidden. So it all depends on kind of your manipulation of the hair dryer, which is one of the big factors with the Dutch pour. That's one of the hardest parts about the Dutch pour, is just manipulating your hairdryer around, and it does take a little bit of practice, but we'll give this a try and see what we come up with. So I'll put that over to the side. But again, you can get some great results without using the cell activator, so don't think you have to use that. And you can still get a lot of cells without any cell activator as well. So let me move these aside. And let's jump in and get started. So I'm gonna slide these over here. I'll put on my base coat first. And I need a stick. I got my stick. So I'm gonna just go ahead and pour on my base coat. And this is the base coat, by the way. I did use a color. This is mostly white, but then I did add a little bit of a blue color. Which blue did I add? I added a tiny bit of blue-gray to my white. So it gave it just this very, very light, soft, light blue color. I didn't want it to be white, like stark white, like the cell activator. I wanted to give it a little bit of color. And also, it's not super easy to see, but it's a little easier to see on the canvas than just a white paint would be. And I quite like to mix up colors with the base coats. Instead of always using a white or a black, I really like to use colors a lot and also split base coats. We'll take a look at that next week as a variation of the Dutch pour. So I'm just kind of scraping out as much as I can here. And there we go. That's all you need. And then I'm going to set this aside. I'll clean this out later. And we're ready to go. So obviously you could take your palette knife and you could just spread this out with the palette knife. That's totally fine. But I tend to like to blow out my base coats, and it gives it a little more even coverage, but you can also give your hairdryer a little bit of practice. So a little hairdryer warm-up practice before you start moving your colors around. That never hurts. So I'm going to turn her on, and sorry for the noise if it gets really noisy. It shouldn't be super noisy, but I'll blow out my base coat, and then we will proceed. So here we go. All right, we got that covered. And again, sorry for the noise. And I'm going to go ahead and pop the air bubbles here. It's always a good idea. You create a lot of air bubbles when you blow out your base coat. And I'm not too worried about the edges. On some of these edges, the paint went over the top. I'm not too worried about it. I can always go back and touch it up. You could use your finger and just touch it up now or after. Whatever you like to do. It doesn't take very long, actually. So however you like to do it, I'm not going to do all of these edges, but you could do it now, you could do it later. But we're going to be getting more paint covering the edges as well as we start blowing out our colors. Okay, so next up, we're going to decide on how to put our paints on here. I'm going to do a kind of a combo method and show you a few of those different styles of blowing out your paint. And I blew some base coat right into my purple color. So I might put like a puddle over here and then maybe a line, a couple lines of color over here. And we'll see how it goes. So maybe I'll start with my Payne's Gray, and I'll kind of go from dark to light. So my darks are kind of on the bottom. And again, I don't need to have lots and lots of paint. You know, the little paint goes a long way, I found, with the Dutch pour. A little bit of our purple. So you can add some wiggles, you can do lots of different things. Maybe a little of our green. Little drips. And maybe some gold. And there we go. So we've got a lot of paints on here. And let's see, I'm just taking a look and seeing if there's anything else I want to do. I think that looks pretty good for now. Let's add a little bit of our cell activator. And you could actually use a stick. I'm going to maybe use a stir stick so I don't get too much on here. And the cell activator is also a very thin consistency, usually the same consistency as the paints. And I'm going to just drizzle on a little bit here. That's our white. I'll maybe touch more. And so I'll blow this out first, this puddle, and then you can kind of see what that cell activator looks like. And so to blow this out, we're just going to kind of blow it the same way. I like to start high with my blower and then kind of work my way down until the paint starts to move. Instead of starting right on it and just blow it everywhere, I like to start up high and then kind of work my way down into the paint. So let me blow this out and we'll see what we've got. There we go. So that's pretty cool. And this is very similar to a bloom, actually. As you might have noticed, that's kind of on purpose. I did it that way. So you can simulate blooms this way with the Dutch pour. And you could also simulate like the deconstructed blooms, which are, you know, Waterfall Acrylics has invented those. And those are gorgeous. But this is very similar to the way you can create those. It's a little bit different because the traditional deconstructed bloom is still a bloom using all the bloom ingredients. This is just using our regular old paints, but we can get something very similar. So, but as you can see, we got lots and lots of cells. The cell activator is kind of doing its thing. We've got a bigger blob. Now you could also go in with straws if you wanted to and blow this out. You could also go in and do a reverse swipe and just do like a bloom swipe if you wanted to as well. That's technique we'll take a look at maybe next week, doing a combination of a Dutch pour and a bloom swipe, which is kind of a cool way to incorporate these two. So I'm liking that. Let's go ahead and play around with our big old line of colors. And before I do that, Kathy's got a question. And Kathy is asking, have you ever used Artist Masters All Wand? I'm not quite sure what that is. Your opinion is always appreciated. Artist Masters Paint, is that a paint brand? I don't think I have, because it doesn't sound familiar. But give them a try. It sounds like they might be cool. So let me know if that's a paint brand, Kathy. It might be a line of metallic paints. Maybe that's right, or maybe it's totally wrong. I don't know. But I don't think I've used them, no. So let's see here. Okay, so what I'm gonna do now is, before I start blowing this out, I'm gonna flip the camera, and let me add this to the stream. So you can maybe get a little bit better, is this gonna work? Maybe down here, you can get a little bit clearer idea of how high my dryer is to the paint, and kind of how I work from the top down. Let me see if I can zoom out a little bit. Just give you kind of a different perspective. And Donna's asking, are you going to put some white on that strip? I'm going to put a white on maybe half of this strip, so I can show you kind of the difference between a regular Dutch pour without any cell activator and some cell activator. So let me put some white over here, and then I'll leave this more plain and see what happens. And you can kind of get an idea of what they look like next to each other. There we go. Okay, so you can kind of see the very tip of my dryer, and I'll show you kind of how I start high, move down to blow the paint out. So let's get going. Okay, so I'm going to flip back now. Hopefully you could kind of see the height difference that I kind of create with my dryer, kind of moving in, moving back. That's very important to kind of controlling your paint. Let me flip back here. You can kind of get a better shot of what is happening. And hopefully that will clear it, become less blurry in a second. But I quite like this one right here. We have very, very fine lacing running up through here. Our cell activator actually kind of sank into the gold, which kind of gave it an interesting look. But pretty happy with that. I kind of like having some areas, this is personal preference, but some areas not so crazy with the cells. Kind of, just more plain, I guess you could say. This is kind of a plain area in here, an area of rest also. So, but these are, what I did here is kind of that left, right, or up, down version. This was obviously kind of the puddle pour going in multiple directions. This is more of an up and down direction that we looked at in our PDF. And then now here, I'm going to go more in that stream direction, maybe a stream on the top, and then more of that tree branch on the bottom, and show you kind of how that would look. We're kind of running out of room, and I don't want to screw up this, what we've got going on up here. So this is going to be more of a stream running kind of straight, and then this one will kind of be a little bit more of a angle. So let's go ahead and blow that out and see what we can do. And then again, there's no cell activator in here. You'll see the difference between having it and not having it. So here we go. Okay, so that is a little misleading a bit, just because we're very constricted with space here. So I did kind of blow straight across. We got some cells, which I kind of like, but it kind of gives it this little bit more feathery look. And then here we kind of went diagonal, which kind of is the way it normally looks, but we have a lot of paint here and just not a lot of space. So it doesn't look exactly like it normally would doing the tree branch. A normal kind of tree branch movement looks much more similar to this, only at an angle, one angle or another. Kind of like we have here. This is a bit of a tree branch pour. So that is kind of a illustration of the different ways you can kind of blow out your puddles. And of course, you can do any which way you like. Experiment is always a great way to come up with awesome new ways to blow out your paint. But those are just kind of 4 or 5, of the kind of basic ways you can, directions you can move your paint puddles around. So hopefully that helps. And hopefully that was kind of a good illustration. It's not like the most unified Dutch pour, just because I did these different things, but I kind of like the end result. I think it's kind of cool. And it does kind of tie itself together in a kind of a weird way. We have for this kind of long band of paint here, which I kind of like because that's different than everything else we've got going on. So I'm kind of pleased with it. I really like these colors though. So I think the colors work really well together. But so that is basically what we're going to be doing this month. So Dutch pour, kind of a standard Dutch pour, or you could add the cell activators and create some more interest. And as you can see here, we left this for a while, and that white cell activator kind of changed and moved around. It created some of this big lacing we have going on there. So it did kind of alter itself, which it tends to do sometimes. So there we go. Let's see, is that in the frame? Cool. So I do like all the cells though. I think those all turn out very nice. I really like our little kind of bloom puddle thing we got going on here. Now another thing you can do, which we'll do next week, is use your spinner, and you could kind of blow out your puddles and then gently spin them, and that will kind of change things around a little bit. And you can kind of expand your cells. You have to be kind of careful because the paint is so thin. You can easily distort them, but gentle spinning will kind of create some interesting, new interesting compositions. So let me see here. So let me flip back and see if there are any questions you might have about our Dutch pour technique of the month. And by the way, here's a Dutch pour behind me, which is very similar to this technique that we just did, only I did spin this one out behind me kind of gently, and it kind of changed the way the cells look and things like that. So it's kind of fun to spin out your Dutch pours. So let me see here. I gotta get a drink of water. Okay. So no questions. Thanks for the comments. Everyone seems to enjoy or like the Dutch pour, which is cool. That's very good. I'm happy. It turned out pretty nice. I'm pretty pleased with it. They're fun to do. I am not great. I am not a Dutch pour, master by any stretch of the imagination. I don't do lots and lots of them. Every time I do them, I enjoy doing them a lot, but for some reason I just don't do lots of Dutch pours. But they are fun to do. Let's see here. And follow up from Kathy. She says those paints she was talking about were from Joanne Fabrics, from Joann's. I'll have to check them out. I haven't used them, but I'll check them out and see if I can find them. Cool. All right. Okay, everyone. So I don't see any questions. And Donna has got a comment. She says, like the colors, I have a hard time with this technique. I think my paint is too thick. That's probably the reason. If it's not flowing easily, your paint is too thick. That's usually the #1 problem people have. They try to just blow the paint, and the paint is just way, way too thick to be manipulated with the hair dryer. So yeah, definitely go with the thin, watery type consistency. And you'll notice that it'll move very easily. So you'll have to be, kind of in control of your hair dryer. But thanks, Donna. Good comment. All right. Well, that is what we're going to be doing this month. You can go check out those downloads, print them out if you want to. I'll post the replay up in the membership when we're done. And Friday we'll be doing another demo. Maybe it'll be a Dutch pour. We'll find out. And next week we'll do the Painting Night Live, and I'll show you some variations of the Dutch pour, how you can use this technique and maybe incorporate a couple other things. Maybe the cell activator, the bloom swipe would be a fun one. We'll break out the spinner, do one of those. And of course, the clear base coats. So I'll have a clear base coat PDF for you next week as well. So, alrighty. Cool. So thanks so much for joining me, everyone. It's great to be back. We're going to jump into 2023 and blow some paint around and have a whole lot of fun. So thanks so much for joining me. I will see you on Friday. Take care, everyone. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.